And welcome once again to our Thursday night Torah study, chat, shared commentary. I'm James from the Idol Smasher YouTube page, and this is the Noahide Nexus, a bleak Noahide Nexus. We had some folks join in last week. They came in a little later and had some really great conversation. We might have that this week. I know that one of our regulars, Pam, is not going to be here this evening. She's a bit under the weather. We're going to wish her well, and we'll just move right along. Before we get started, in my country, in the United States of America, this is voting season, or should I say primary voting season. This is also the season when our representatives get together in our states and start making laws. That's what they like to do. They like making laws, no matter how frivolous or insulting or how much of a waste. But then again, that's what politicians do. You know, my Facebook and my Google Plus page, and I don't allow political talk on the Noahide Nexus Facebook page, but on my personal page and friends and whatnot, everyone's got something to say about somebody to get elected. Vote for this person. This person's a Nazi. No, this person's a Nazi. And this person likes the Klan. No, this person likes the Klan. And I have nobody that's really gotten me off my rear. There's nobody that really stands out that makes me say I would vote for him. The last person that I felt that way about was Ron Paul. And we all know what happened to his supporters and his campaign and how that turned out in 2008, 2012. But nobody's really gotten off my, no one's really inspired me. I like Trump. No, I don't like the Klan. No, I don't hate Muslims. No, I don't want this country to be ruined. I like Trump. I always have. Do I think he's presidential material? No. Bernie Sanders. I like Bernie Sanders. No, I don't believe in free stuff. No, I don't put animals with equal or more rights than people. No, I don't think that the white guy's bad. I just like Bernie Sanders. So you've got these people. I don't like Hillary. I like nothing about her. She's a criminal. But I really don't have a lot of political posts to make, a lot of political commentary to make, which can be kind of like you're left out of something. You're kind of left out. But I really believe, as a Noahide who really believes in the Torah and the law, that if I am to support the establishment of fair and balanced courts of justice, I cannot support anything my government does. I have a really difficult time saying that I'm in good conscience, mind you, that if I go to the polls and select the lesser of two evils, or if I go to the polls because I just feel that's what I have to do, it's my duty. It's not a duty. It's just a liberty. It's a right. Somehow I'm not helping the cause, and I really feel that by not showing up, I say more than if I did. And that is, I don't feel that anybody represents me, and nobody's really worth my time. And if you're one of those out there, and I know there are a lot because voter turnout is low in the States, if you're not up for voting and you don't believe in it, don't take the heat from people. You don't have to vote. And voting for the lesser of two evils is still voting for evil. Oh, the rabbi's here. I hadn't even noticed you came in. Hello, Rabbi. Rabbi Kostanov dropping by. I'm kind of going off on a personal rant.
Hey.
Tonight's topic is taxes, and that's grueling enough. But the political.
Oh, what fun! What fun!
I just kind of want to make a point that if you don't want to vote, don't. And I would even suggest not voting. People who get elected, everybody who says they ruin the government, they're ruining this country, were elected, and they continue to do this kind of thing. You're not going to help anything necessarily by voting. All the good stuff happens when you're not voting. You know, there's a lot more days of the year for 4 years than the 2 days you go out and vote in this country. So, you know, you can do better in the world than going at the polls. I don't feel it's as big of a deal as folks want to make it.
It's not my monkey, not my circus. I can't vote in the U.S. anymore, so it's kind of irrelevant to me. I could possibly lend support to a certain candidate or maybe hope they win, but I mean, whether it's not, I don't live there. I'm no longer an American citizen, and I can't vote there. So I really, that's really not my topic.
Well, Rabbi, honestly, they have the dead voting in our country, so someone's probably taken your ballot anyway, so you're covered.
It doesn't happen in just America.
Oh, really? Oh, how's voting in Israel? Hello, Ross. Shalom.
It's you go you have a certain poll station. Um, you don't necessarily vote for a particular candidate, at least in as far as the Knesset elections go. You vote for certain parties, and whoever the top dog in that party is tends to become the prime minister. But power is spread out a little bit differently here than it is in the U.S. So it's for example, in America, the Secretary of Defense works for the president. The president says, "Hey, we're going to bomb this guy. We're going to bomb. Let's pick a random country. Zimbabwe. Sure, we're going to bomb Zimbabwe. Make it happen." The Secretary of Defense in the U.S. says, "Okay, fine." In Israel, the cabinet members may not be on the same side as the prime minister. They may be. It's how he forms a coalition and how he shares power. So the prime minister, Secretary of Defense here, and say, "Hey, we want to bomb these people," and the Secretary of Defense could go, "No, we're not doing it," and veto him, basically. So it's a little bit different here.
Do you have?
Shalom.
Hello, shalom, Ross. Are there political parties in Israel like there are here? I mean, we have two. There are only two opinions that matter.
Yeah, there's dozens. There's dozens.
Really? Are they like the lower 5% of the voting population are in the massive amount of parties, and you have two that are the front runners, or is there actually a variety?
There's a pretty big variety. Our parliament is called the Knesset. It has 120 seats, and it's right now it's pretty diverse. There's, I want to say, 7 or 8 different parties that hold seats in the Knesset. So I mean, it's a pretty broad representation of views. Certainly not all of which I agree deserve to be there and be represented, but they're there anyway. But that's democracy. It's messy.
Yes, it is. Well, this week's Parsha, if you're tuning in for the first time, a Parsha is a portion of the Torah in which we read every year. The Torah is broken up into a reading schedule, a weekly reading schedule. This week is Parsha Vayakhel. One day I'll know them better. Which starts at the beginning of chapter 35 of Exodus. We're in Shemot, Exodus. It's going to run from the beginning, verse 1 of chapter 35, through chapter 38, verse 20. So once again, Exodus, if you're following along at home, 35 through 38, verse 20. We'll go through the verse of 20. Now, of course, the topic this week I picked, is taxes. And one of the reasons why I bring this up again, we've seen the collection of money, I think, 4 times so far in Exodus. When I say money, I gold, silver, precious jewels. You know what I'm saying? First time happened in Egypt. At the Exodus, the Egyptians just gave their riches to the Israelites before they left. Their gold, their silver, their precious stones, they just gave it to them. And that's, of course, what goes on to build the Mishkan later on. We had a collection taken earlier for material, I believe, for the Ark and the priestly garments, I believe. I think this might be in the same time. I'm not. I'm assuming he has already come down from Sinai, where we're at now. But beforehand, there was a collection taken. Only this time, I think even in Egypt, the Egyptians gave up their goods willingly. When Moses asked for a collection, it was all whose heart moves them to do so, have them bring gold, take their gold earrings, actually this would be the 5 collection this week. But we had that collection. It was, for those whose heart moves them. We had a census taken, which of course was going for the maintenance of the Mishkan. That was not a voluntary act though, and it was just a half shekel, so even the poorest of the tribe could enter into the census, as we described last week. Discussed last week. We don't count heads, we each head would bring money, and you count the money, or you count the half shekel, and that's how we take census. We don't actually number the people. That's actually very bad to do. Just ask King David. We had the collection taken so that we don't have a revolution on our hands at Sinai. We know when Moses went up ascended the mountain to receive the tablets and talk with God. The people, the mixed multitude, and apparently some Israelites as well, there was going to be a rebellion. They needed something to focus their attention on, even though the presence of God was right there, resting on the mountain at Sinai. And he just exited from Egypt, and he actually, in a manner of speaking, shows up in person and speaks to them, which is kind of in a very, modern day vernacular, pretty much what happened at Sinai. They heard God speak directly to them, 3 million people. There's no indication whatsoever that I can find that God's presence went away from Sinai, which it says the people were in awestruck of this fiery presence of God upon the mountain. And then we go and make idols. So we had to take a collection to make the golden calf. Aaron did, and we have another collection, and again, it says something I think that is important and worth discussing, especially in the topic of taxes, and that is, every wise person among you shall come and make everything that Hashem has commanded. Earlier, it is chapter 35, verse 4, Moses said to the entire assembly of the children of Israel, saying, this is the word that Hashem has commanded, saying, take from yourselves a portion for Hashem. Everyone whose heart motivates him shall bring it as a gift for Hashem. Gold, silver, copper, turquoise, purple and scarlet, wool, linen, and goat hair, red dyed ram skins, tachash skins, acacia wood, oil for illumination, spices for the anointment oil and the aromatic incense, shahom stones and stones for the settings, for the ephod and the breastplate. Okay. You're going to be motivated at this point, I would think, it's just interesting that, here's Hashem, creator and sustainer of the universe. If he says do so, you do. He didn't command that everyone take a percentage of their goods. He said whosever heart moves them. And it was for such a worthy cause. If I'm not mistaken, the last collection taken, they took too much. There was too much to use. They had to actually say, stop. We have enough gold. Stop. Something you won't hear too often in the modern world, I don't think. We have enough gold. We have enough silver. Everything's working fine. Thank you. Keep it. Takes another collection later. And he says that. In fact, he says wise-hearted man several times. Everyone whose heart motivated. Every man whose heart inspired him to come. Then men came with the women. Everyone whose heart motivated him brought bracelets, nose rings, body ornaments, so forth. Every man with whom was found turquoise, purple, and scarlet wool, linen. Okay, let me move on here to 25, verse 25. Every wise-hearted woman spun with her hands. Every man and woman whose heart motivated them to bring for any of the work. I'm going down basically almost verse by verse. You're finding all these popping out in 35 alone. And it gets into building the sanctuary with Bezalel, but I found that very interesting that it was made so clear to us. It's in your face that this was, God didn't want to force you to donate, to take part, and still everything came together. I thought that was really great, and that was my first thing I wanted to, or that came to my mind I wanted to bring up, was how it was made so plainly clear.
Couple of things.
Hi, Ross.
Hello. I may be mistaken. It may be because it's leap year, but sometimes this is a double Parsha with the following Parsha also read, but again, I may be off. I'm not sure. We won't check the calendar accurately.
Asking Rabbi Google myself. Chabad. Just has the one. They would both, right? Wouldn't they?
I'm sorry?
Wouldn't Chabad.org list them both if it was a double parsha?
That's quite possible. And this being a leap year, it may be the case that it's only a single Parsha. Don't know that that actually has anything to do with it, but I do know in times past it has presented itself to be so. That's great. Then I've already got notes for next week's class.
It's good to look ahead.
35:1. Did you you said it said the entire assembly?
Yes.
Did you catch what that meant?
Well, I can assume it meant everybody, mixed multitude, women, children, men.
Right. And then what does it say immediately in verse 2?
On 6 days, on 6 days, work may be done. On the seventh day shall be holy for you, a day of complete rest for Hashem. Whoever does work on it shall be put to death. You shall not kindle fire in any of your dwellings on the Sabbath day.
3. What does verse 2 say to you?
It says, if you were there with Israel at Sinai, you will rest on Saturday. Your food will have to be cooked ahead of time or prepared ahead of time, and you should spend it reading Torah and spending time with your family, and whatever it is, don't work.
Yeah, and it does say 6th day and 7th day. It doesn't say Shabbat.
That's true.
That's one of the things that stuck out at me. Didn't get to the Haftarah either.
And he says that right before he gives off a list of things that need to be worked for.
This is, I don't know about you, but every time I go through this, the more I know, the more this changes, if you know what I mean.
Oh, yes. I've been through the Parsha a couple times before, and I never once thought about taxes. I never once thought about people contributing for the greater good.
I don't know that you would actually call this a tax. I think you would call it a donation for the contribution. I think it even says contribution.
Yes. Is the word tax even ever mentioned in Torah?
If you see the word, it usually comes up, if I'm correct, as usury, interest, which is a form of a tax.
Okay.
Right, like a person caught in theft, having taken an object that doesn't belong to him. Not only does he have to give the object or the money back, he has to pay a fixed rate amount over and above it, like an interest, like a penalty.
But outside of that, I don't believe it's acceptable to charge anyone interest on a loan.
Certainly not amongst Israelites. That would not be beneficial.
You're not allowed to charge another Israelite interest, generally speaking, but in the case of the theft thing, you are.
I would hope so.
If I recall correctly, Nehemiah 10, when Nehemiah is talking to the Gerim, he encourages them to cease charging usury amongst their own selves.
Yeah.
And he uses, I believe the word is, we Jews don't charge interest to one another. You shouldn't do it either.
Well, it's a nation, and it's a family, too, at the same time. When you look at it, I mean, technically, wouldn't it? It'd really be a family thing. As big as 3 million people or so were, or 2 million people. It just wouldn't work out economically.
No. Next time you need a loan, I won't forget that interest you charged me.
It's like it would be easy to get out of hand with interest.
Sure. Well, it could be an escalation sort of thing. Like today, we have these user fees and obnoxious fees and secondary by-the-way fees, and just because the government says we can, another tax.
My favorite one is the word that came up, I guess, 10 years ago. I'd never heard it before. Surcharge. Like, I got a ticket in Texas, and I paid the ticket. And I moved to Kansas, and then I found out I have a warrant for my arrest in Texas. I call up the courthouse, well, you didn't pay the surcharge. And they tack on 30% of what you pay as a fine for, and you're basically, it's a service charge. You're paying them to accept your money.
Oh, yeah, otherwise known as a processing fee.
Processing fee, yes. I guess that caught on, so they changed it to surcharge. Bezalel. Go ahead.
Well, Bezalel. Yeah, I was reading through there. He had a little help.
He did.
Yeah, it never caught my attention before, but this time saw that he had a couple of fellows helping him.
Every wise man, every man, every wise, how's it worked? Wise-hearted man within whom Hashem had endowed wisdom. That's kind of a key right there, because when you're in Egypt, you're a worker, you're a machine, you're property, you are a battery. That's what you do. You make bricks and you stack them, and you make bricks and you stack them, and you hold candelabras while Egyptians eat. Those are the things that Israelites were doing in Egypt, and they weren't exactly the most skilled bunch. And although he did have help, he gets the credit. Have you noticed that?
Right, absolutely.
Let's see, he made the ark, he made the cover, he made the table, he made the planks and their components, he made the cover, he made the partitions, he made the screen, he made the menorah, he made the incense, he made elevation offering, the elevation offering of acacia wood, he made the laver of copper, he made the courtyard. And that's the final time we hear of him making.
Right.
But it's
that used to strike me as a little bit odd, Moses is a Levite. He's receiving instructions. His brother is a Cohen who's supposed to perform functions in the Mishkan. But it was a man from the tribe of Judah that was responsible for the construction of all the artifacts.
He chose a 13-year-old.
Yes.
And I can just see, and maybe this is because I've grown up in the States too long, but I can see people. What does that punk kid know? You know, you'd have, you know, strapping, you know, strong and able-bodied 35, 30-year-old, 25-year-olds, and this very, very young man, fresh from a bris apparently. Not a bris. Bar mitzvah. Is whoopsie, is heading up everything. But it's, you know, it's like King David. He chose the runt to be the king. He didn't choose the other brothers. He chose the smallest. And we have artisans in whom God endows the wisdom in which to construct these things, and he puts them in charge of in essence a kid, kind of, you know. Another lesson in humility, I would say.
Flipping through the pages, but one of Aaron's sons assisted in putting together.
Aholiab?
No. I wrote it down too. He had 4 sons, 2 of which eventually die. But it was, I think, his 4th and youngest son. I'm still looking. I'll let you know what I find. And I think Oholiab was the man from the tribe of Dan who assisted. I think he was involved in some of the weaving and the garments.
Yes. Son of Ahisamach of the tribe of Dan. Filled him with a wise heart to do every craft of the carver, weaver of designs, and embroider, with the turquoise, purple, and scarlet wool, and the linen. And the weaver, the artisans of every craft and makers of designs.
Did you find it?
I heard that, you know, the wise men were people who were more inclined to be good. Like, God knew this person would be good with metal, this person would be good with, you know, with linens, that sort of thing.
Right. Skills. They had skills.
So that would mean Jewish craftsmanship has divine roots.
Sure. Jewelers, tailors, all of that.
You know, if God endowed these people with wisdom, that wisdom that was passed on to the generations came from God, really. That's wild. I never thought of that.
I've thought of it that along those lines for some time. It hit me some time ago that created man in his image. And we all know that he doesn't have a physical form, a face, no physical existence. He is not a physical person. So usually when people read created man in his image, then you go back and say, well, God isn't physical, so what are we talking about here? That's when it occurred to me that this is the way I interpret it, in his image, wisdom comes from him, knowledge comes from him, discernment comes from him, And we, in his image, are able to receive those and reflect the knowledge that comes from Hashem, the wisdom that comes from Hashem, and so on and so forth. If that makes sense.
Yeah. See, I was always more fascinated that Cain's children, who helped him build the city after Eden, would have this knowledge. And you know, Christian myth says they were fallen angels who taught men these gifts. And since the world went bad, and then they go ahead and read here where God endows people with skills, I wonder if that's where they got the idea. But I was always enamored with the notion that you could build a city without having any cities been built before, that you would know how to construct buildings that hold up in the winter, and massive amounts of them, and organize, you know, structures and areas and whatnot into a citadel, or a functioning city.
Or a pyramid, for that matter.
It never occurred to me that in the end, it was God who kind of rebooted technology and craftsmanship in Israel. So it kind of wouldn't matter what Cain's kids were taught, really, if what we have now. I don't know, maybe I'm talking too much.
No. I understand. I'm not going to be able to find it. It would take too long. But wisdom, skills, the ability to know how to work a particular craft, that fits right in. All of those elements come out in the Haftarah.
Oh, we'll have to get to that then. But let's check that out right now.
It's a lovely Haftarah.
We're going to go to the Haftorah. If you're watching this for the first time out there in YouTube, Google Plus land, a Haftorah is a portion of the Hebrew Bible that directly pertains to the Torah portion we're reading each week. This week's portion, I have it marked. Hang on. One thing you learn in Judaism is you learn to use those little cloth things, those little dangly things on your books. They actually function great bookmarkers.
It's 2 Kings chapter 11.
Second Kings? You mean first chapter 11? Really? Okay. Okay, I have to look for that. The stone has Vayakhel as 1 Kings chapter 7 for Sephardic and
Chabad.
Yeah, and Haftorah, and then it's 1 Kings 7, 40 through 50 rather than 13 through 26. But you're saying 2 Kings chapter 11.
Right, would be the starting one. If you're going by Chabad, if you're going by stone, it's obviously what you just quoted.
Okay. Let's try. We'll do 2 Kings. We'll do them all. I say we do them all. I don't know if I'll read them all. I have to get my Koran Tanakh, which is the best translation. Actually, it's not too much off in the Hertz. Let's see what the Hertz has here. Or I'll ask, hey Ross, what's your Haftorah?
In the Stone edition, it's 1 Kings chapter 7, verses 13 through 26.
Let's start there first, because that's what I had here in mind as well. Tell us what you found. I want to mark some other places too.
Okay. Well, It's King Solomon sent and brought Hiram, however you care to pronounce it, from Tyre. And we read about Hiram in the World of the Ger, I believe, if you recall.
Yes.
Pretty great Ger fellow. And his father, Hiram's father, was a coppersmith. He was filled with wisdom. It says in the verse 13, a resident of Tyre, was a coppersmith. He was filled with wisdom, insight, and knowledge to perform all the work with copper. So he came to King Solomon and performed all his work.
Really?
Yes. And I'm not sure if it...
Yeah, Hiram was a non-Jew, correct?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, a Phoenician.
His mother was Jewish or Hebrew, and she was a widow. Wait a minute. Hiram's father was a coppersmith, but his mother was a widow? Something doesn't right. Or maybe that's going to take some investigation. At any rate, he produces everything that was supposed to be for the temple copper-wise. And apparently he went above and beyond, because it eventually states that there was so much copper work done that they didn't even bother to count it. Did I lose you?
Sounds similar. Sounds familiar.
Yeah, it's along the lines of, hey, we've got more than we need. You can stop now. Anyway, he built 2 pillars for Solomon's temple. And I don't know if you've read it before or if you recall it, but those 2 pillars that stood in front of the temple, one was named Boaz. That was the left pillar. And the right pillar was named Yachin. So it was Hiram's father that was responsible for creating those 2 pillars.
Huh. Now, why were they named? Why did they have those 2 names?
I'm sure they're significant, but Boaz, for me, rings a bell back to Ruth.
Right.
And we know Ruth and Boaz are in the lineage of David.
Right.
Yachin, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Perhaps somebody smarter than me can give us some information, insight.
Looking at the Haftorah for Ashkenazim, yeah, which would be chapter 7, verse 40. And it says right here, Hiram made the pots, the shovels, the basins. So Hiram made an end of all doing the work for King Solomon in the house, the 2 pillars and the 2 bowls of the capitals that were on top of the pillars, the 2 networks to cover the 2 bowls. It kind of goes through a list of things he did there. Pots, shovels, basins. Burnished brass is how it's described in the Sansino, the Hertz edition.
Yeah. Nonetheless,
That's some heavy.
quite, quite a skilled artisan.
Yeah. So we're seeing parallels to Hiram and old Bezalel, aren't we?
Yeah, yeah. Well, not to mention too that Hiram was the one that I'm sure supplied cedar wood, but he also supplied a certain amount of craftsmen, and
Yes.
Solomon contributed a labor force also. Labor force, I'm pretty sure the labor force that Solomon contributed were the conquered Gerim, or the ones that submitted the 7 laws in a time of confrontation or war. Matter of fact, I know for sure, and one of the clues that I picked up on was that when Solomon sent the labor force, it specifically mentions that among the labor force were Jebusites.
Really?
Yes.
So not only did the king, he actually provided his people to do it. He didn't just sell the land to David. He must have offered help.
You mean the previous king that was conquered by David?
Well, didn't he go to the Jebusites and say we'd like to build our temple, and he said take it, and he said no, let me pay for it, and he paid right then and there.
Well, he took the city by force. It wasn't. It was a military campaign.
Really?
Yeah.
Yes, our man Joab went up through the water tunnel, smote the Jebusites, and they surrendered. So they accepted the 7 laws that way.
Yeah. A water tunnel, by the way, which is still there and you can take tours of.
Huh.
But yeah, Hiram, part of this whole controversy, as far as laboring from Hiram of Tyre, the massive building projects that Solomon undertook, it caused a lot of, first of all, it involved a lot of forced labor, people being sent to Phoenicia, which is modern-day Lebanon, to cut cedar wood for the temple and other building projects. When Solomon died, his son, Rehoboam, he distanced himself from the advice of, I believe it was his father's advisors, and he didn't let up on the taxes for the people. He didn't give them a break after his father died. In fact, he actually increased their taxes and increased their labor, and that's why the kingdom split into 2. Eventually, the northern kingdom and the kingdom of Judah. So taxes become a contentious issue even later on down the line.
Wow. I didn't see that coming. Was he being selfish, or did he just have a lot of zeal?
He was young and inexperienced, and followed bad advice. He listened to his friends, who were his own age, instead of his advisors, which were much older. He said, "Look, these people are they're crying out for relief," and he basically said, "Okay, well, I'll make it much worse for them. That'll teach them." And really, it taught him, because they all left and they formed their own country, basically, and that led to a number of very long list of unfortunate events.
I think his statement was, if you think my father's burdens were heavy, my pinky finger will be more than what he could exert.
Something along those lines, yes. He was not a particularly wise ruler.
As it sounded.
Was it Rehoboam that took David's former advisor, or was it the other son that was trying to usurp the kingship?
I believe Absalom.
That's right. Absalom was the one who took Othiophel, I think was his name, who I believe was also a Garrett.
Now I have 2 Kings chapter 11 ready. And since I'm not quite as familiar with this, I thought I would read through it. What does it go to? Do you know, Rabbi?
2 Kings chapter 11, 17 through 20, and then it moves on to 2 Kings 12, 1 through 17.
1 through 20. Okay. You say 10 through 20 on 11? Yeah.
17 through 20.
17 through 20. Okay. And okay. And Jehoiada made a covenant between the Lord and the king and the people, that they should be the Lord's people, between the king also and the people. And all the people of the land went into the house of Baal and pulled it down, his altars and his images they broke in pieces thoroughly, and slew Matan, the priest of the Baal, before the altars. And the priest appointed officers over the house of the Lord. And he took rulers over hundreds, and the Kari, and the runners, and all the people of the land. And they brought down the king from the house of the Lord, and they came by the way of the gate of the runners to the king's house, and he sat on the throne of the kings. And all the people of the land rejoiced, and the city was in quiet. And they slew Atalyahu with the sword in the king's house. 7 years old was Jehoash when he began to reign. In the 7th year of Jehoash began to reign, and 40 years he reigned in Jerusalem. I have to use tiny little reading, or tiny little letters. And his mother's name was Zivia of Beersheba, and Jehoash did that which was right in the sight of the Lord all his days, as Jehoiada the priest instructed him. But the high places were not taken away. The people still sacrificed and burnt incense in the high places. And Jehoash said to all the priests, all the money of the dedicated things which is brought into the house of the Lord, in current money and in money of persons, by assessment of every man, and all the money that any man is prompted by his heart to bring into the house of the Lord, let the priests take it to them, every man from his acquaintance, and let them repair the breaches of the house wherever any breach shall be found. But it happened in the 23rd year of the king Jehoash, and that the priests had not repaired the breaches of the house. Then King Jehoash called for Jehoiada the priest and the other priests, and said to them, why do you not repair the breaches of the house? Now therefore receive no more money of your acquaintances, but deliver it for the breaches of the house. And the priests consented to receive no more money of the people, nor to repair the breaches of the house. But Jehoiada the priest took a chest and bored a hole in the lid of it, and set it beside the altar, on the right side as one comes into the house of the Lord. And the priests that kept the door put in it all the money that was brought into the house of the Lord. And when they saw that there was much money in the chest, the king's scribe and the high priest came up, and they tied it in bags, and counted the money that was found in the house of the Lord. And they gave the money that was counted into the hands of them that did the work, that had the oversight of the house of the Lord. And they dispersed it to the carpenters and builders that worked upon the house of the Lord, and to the masses and hewers of stone, and to buy timber and hewn stone to repair the breaches. Turn the page. Of the house of the Lord, for all that was laid out for the house to repair it. I'm going to bring it a little closer here.
Yeah, that just brings to mind.
Made for the house of the Lord. Thank you, honey. Let's try that again. But they were not made for the house of the Lord bowls of silver, snuffers, basins, trumpets, or any vessels of gold or vessels of silver, from the money that was brought into the house of the Lord, for they gave that to the workmen, and they repaired it with the men into whose hand they delivered the money to pay out the workmen, for they dealt in good faith. The money for guilt offerings and the money for sin offerings was not brought into the house of the Lord. It was delivered to the priests. Is that the end of our Haftorah? It was the end of 17.
That just brings so much to mind, what you just read. There was a stone found during excavations that I think Jehu had written about his undertaking of the repairs of the temple. Rabbi, are you familiar with that?
Yeah, it's called the Jehu Stone. I was actually reading an article about it not that long ago. Let me see if I can find it.
This was the tale of what was going on? Inscribed?
Yeah, I think it was written contemporaneous to the repairs of the temple, and if I'm not mistaken, there's the flecks of gold that were found in it. We'll let him find the article. While he's looking for that, it also brings to mind Jeremiah chapter 35.
Oh, yes.
The Rechabites doing the work, and it also brings to mind Nehemiah when they're in there doing the repairs after coming back from Babylon, and the money was given to scribes to disperse amongst the workmen, and while the money's being passed out, that's when somebody makes the discovery of the book of the law that Moses had written.
When they found it in the wall?
Yes. And I still say, to this day, Nehemiah planted that book so that it could be found. I still hold by that.
Now, Jeremiah 35. Jeremiah's got a lot of good stuff. I should have read more of them than I had. Let me see if I can get over to him real quick here. And then we'll go to Zephaniah as well. Okay, Jeremiah 35. What happens in 35? Let the story come alive for 35. Here we go. I don't know if anybody else knows this, but the Hebrew Bible is, there's a lot to it. It's a thick book. And the Koran Tanakh is not exactly the most organized. It's just kind of all there. And there's not a table of contents, so you kind of have to flip through to find out where you're going. Okay, here we go. And I'm going to have to read 35 now. Here we go. Then came the word of the Lord to Jeremiah, saying, and I'm just going to say Jeremiah, it's Yeremiah, but then came the word of the Lord to Jeremiah, saying, Thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, Go and tell the men of Yehuda and the inhabitants of Jerusalem, Will you not receive instruction to hearken to my words, says the Lord. The words of Yonadav, the son of Rechev, that he commanded his sons not to drink wine, has been kept, for to this day they drank none, but obey their father's commandment. Yet I have spoken to you from morning till night, but you did not hearken to me. I have also sent you to all my servants, the prophets, sending them from morning till night, saying, Return now every man from his evil way, and amend your doings, and go not after the other gods to serve them. And then you shall dwell in the land which I had given you and to your fathers. But you have not inclined your ear, nor hearkened to me, for the sons of Yonadav, the son of Rechev, have kept the commandment of their father, when he commanded them, but this people has not hearkened to me. Therefore, thus says the Lord, God of hosts, the God of Israel, Behold, I will bring upon Yehuda and upon all the inhabitants of Jerusalem all the evil that I have pronounced against them, because I have spoken to them, but they have not heard, and I have called to them, but they have not answered. And Jeremiah said to the house of Rechavim, Thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, because you have obeyed the commandment of Yonadav your father, and kept all his precepts, and done according to all that he has commanded you. Therefore thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, Yonadav the son of Rechev shall not lack a man to stand before me forever.
Rechabites.
There you go.
Where did he find them?
Where did God find the Rechabites?
Jeremiah. Where did he have to go to round them up?
Go tell the men of Judah or Yehuda and all the inhabitants of Jerusalem.
Essentially, they were working, repairing the. They were working, doing work on the gates.
Right.
And you find a descendant of the Rechabites repairing, I think it's the dung gate or the sheep gate. Malchijah, son of Rechab, is there with Nehemiah after the Babylonian exile. He's doing work to repair the walls and gates. Anyway. Still looking for that article? For that stone?
No, there's actually two different archaeological discoveries. There's something called the Black Obelisk, which was something that was left by the Assyrians that talks about it, Jehu. And there's something called the Tel Dan Stela, which I've actually seen. It was discovered at a place called Tel Dan, just north of here, very near the Syrian border. And it's actually a very, very interesting piece of archaeology because it provides some historical context for a couple of people, Jehu being one of them, but it also mentions the House of David or the Davidic dynasty.
And that's only one of two archaeological discoveries that actually mention the House of David. Is that correct also?
Yeah, the other one's called the Mesha Stela. Mesha was a Moabite king. It mentions the House of David in that as well. There's also there's a third one. It's a little more controversial. Less people accept it, but it's actually an Egyptian monument that mentions. Well, it depends on how you translate it. Some people translate it as something else, but some people translate it as a House of David too. So there's definitely 2 and potentially 3 archaeological finds that talk about a Davidic dynasty.
There's a whole lot more archaeological evidence supporting Jewish history, if you will, history of humanity, but we have to specify in our modern secular world that's being discovered. I mean, people would say, well, there's no evidence for it, and yes, there is. Yes, there is.
Well, on one hand, archaeologists aren't willing to just jump up and give a definitive answer because it would just devastate other people, if you know what I mean.
Well, a lot of archaeology is interpretation too. I mean, you can find a potsherd in Jerusalem, and you can show it to 10 different archaeologists, and they'll have formed 10 different opinions about it. They're a fickle bunch.
That's why Doctor Who says, I point and laugh at archaeology. I'm a time traveler. I point and laugh at archaeology. So we're given actually, I was not expecting the Haftorah portion you gave, Rabbi, to go in with this week's portion, but it really does. Or not portion, I should say, the topic I chose. But if I'm not mistaken, there's no such any time that money is collected from the people, it's directly represented. You know what I mean? There's a tax representation thing here, and what I'm getting out of Torah is every single time they've taken money, it's gone right to this, it's gone right to that, and something that serves the public good. Obviously, when you say public good, you could say humanity, but the temple, the Mishkan.
Right, correct. No middleman skimming off the top.
Is there any way that our system here in the West could ever be repaired to have a fair tax system?
Well, now you're getting into the matter of opinions. What's a fair tax system? And my opinion, you could. Is it likely? No, but it could be done. Sure. I think taxing people. Well, first of all, let's get the idea of what taxation is in its most basic form. Aside from basic obvious needs like I don't know, an army, roads that actually are capable of carrying vehicles and so much. For the most part, taxation for special programs that only benefit a few people or a certain class of people, that's a gang shakedown. I wish there was a nicer way to put it, but that's what it is. But you should tax people a lot less. I mean, this whole concept of freedom begins with property rights, and property rights begins with you keeping most, if not all, of your earnings.
And that's okay in a Torah-based society.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have certain obligations to give charity and things like that, but that's just it. It's charity. Charity. A lot of people, especially here, especially in the West, people equate charity with taxation and social programs. Well, it's not the same thing. I mean, the highest form of charity in Judaism is to teach a man a trade so he becomes self-sufficient, not to keep him on a welfare handout so he's dependent the rest of his life.
I never knew that was the highest form.
According to Maimonides, yes. It's called the 8 levels of charity.
That plays back to what I was saying about servant or slave. however you want to look at that terminology, if he serves under a person for 7 years, whether it's a veterinarian or a farmer or some sort of something like that, if he's in servitude for those 7 years, he could actually learn a trade, and at the end of the 7 years, he could become a productive citizen rather than just remaining a slave. Or he could just stay on and become a servant, or otherwise known as an apprentice to the person whom he had worked for all those years.
Would either of you gentlemen know if you were ever, if it was common that you stay your 6 years, or would it be was it common to stay less? Do you know what I'm saying? Could a person earn his debt in less than 7 years or 6 years?
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, well, you have to understand that type of, you could enter into slavery or servitude simply for owing someone a debt. But I mean, the reality is once you've paid off that debt, theoretically, that's when you should be let go. If that's 6 years, fine. If that's 3 months, fine. What I understand, there's no real clear-cut records of it. I mean, of individual cases, but within the framework, we can only assume that's probably how it worked.
There's a link you gave, a great link to Maimonides' 8 levels of charity. I wouldn't mind going through them. I do want to say that I was one of those people who thought that since I'm already taxed 35–40% of my income, and that I'm paying it, then that's my charity. You know what I'm saying? And I wasn't the only one who thought like this either. But that's kind of what I was taught for a few, not really taught, but that's just what I had assumed and what I worked with and kind of stuck with for many years, was that, yeah, well, I'm already paying, already taking this much money, and it's going to the poor, so yeah, I've done my charity.
Well, the thing is, though, is it's not voluntary on your part. Everybody pays taxes not because they want to, because it's taken out of your paycheck. It's not a really voluntary thing. It's a mandatory thing. Charity that is forced isn't really charity. It's redistribution. There's no virtue in it. The best way you can help the poor is through a person-to-person giving, not giving it to a bloated bureaucracy that gives it out as it sees fit.
I want to read the 8 levels of charity, and I'm going to start with the lowest, and we'll ascend as we go. Number 8, drum roll. Okay, the lesser level. Okay, is one. Okay, the lowest level is one that gives unwillingly. There you go. A greater level than that is one that gives inadequately, but gives gladly with a smile. A greater level than that is one that gives to the poor person after being asked. A greater level of charity, number 5, is when one gives to the poor person directly into his hand, but gives before he's asked. Number 4, a greater level than that is one who does not know to whom one gives, but the poor person does know his benefactor. The greatest sages used to tie coins into their robes and throw them behind their backs, and the poor would come up and pick the coins up off the ropes so that they would not be ashamed. A greater level of charity than that is when one knows to whom one gives, but the recipient does not know his benefactor. The greatest sages used to talk about in secret and put coins in the doors of the poor. It is worthy and truly good to do this, if those who are responsible for distributing charity are not trustworthy. Like a bloated bureaucracy. Number 2, a greater level of charity than that is one is to give to the poor without knowing to whom one gives, and without this recipient knowing whom he received, from whom he received. For this, performing such a mitzvah solely for the sake of heaven. This is like the anonymous fund that was in the holy temple in Jerusalem. There the righteous gave in secret, and the good poor profited in secret. Giving to a charity fund is similar to this mode of charity, though one should not contribute to charity funds unless one knows that the person appointed over the fund is trustworthy and wise and a proper administrator, like Rabbi Hanania ben
Teradin.
A greater level of charity than that is one which there is no greater, is to support a fellow Jew by endowing him with a gift or a loan, or entering into a partnership with him, or finding employment for him, in order to strengthen his hand until he need no longer be dependent upon others.
Yeah, it's the old give a man a fish. Okay, great, he has a fish. Teach a man a fish. Teach a man how to fish for his own fish, and he'll eat the rest of his life.
That's beautiful. Getting all mushy over here. I had Rabbi Dove. He way back in virtual yeshiva years ago. He would say, if you're going to give, you know, when a poor man asks you for, you know, for you got any spare change, Mister, give it. Don't break the bank, but give it. And when you do, make sure you're putting it in his hand and look him in the eye when you do it. And it was such an experience for me and my wife when we first moved here to Oklahoma City that we began to make a habit of keeping change ready in the car. And anytime we see a beggar, we like, you know, it's like, ooh, can we get to him first? Or, you know, can we get over 3 lanes to get to, you know, it's a challenge. It was almost something to do while you're driving, is look for people to give money to. But if you do it in such a direct, I know people are going to tell you, well, they're just going to go spend it on crack, or they're just going to spend it on booze. You don't need to be giving them no money. Yes, just do it. You don't know what he needs it for, but if the man has been humbled enough to ask you, then that's embarrassing enough. Don't embarrass him behind his back by saying he's not a good person. You know, look them in the eye and put it directly in their, just like Maimonides says, put it in their hand, and it really changes your perspective of giving charity.
Well, whether or not they're going to use it for means such as drugs or booze or prostitutes or whatever, that's not really your business. Your business is the business of giving. Regardless of what he does with the money, you've still done the good by giving.
And look them in the eye. That really makes a difference. It'll move. Yeah. It'll get you by the boo-boo. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, just throwing it in a cup or, you know, yeah, here, you know, that look in the eye is a silent way of saying I recognize you as a person, a human being. I relate to you rather than just, yeah, here, you know.
Yeah, I agree. Taxes are unavoidable. I do like having a kept road. I like having a brute squad around. I like having police. You know, I like having my roads lit at night, so, you know, so I can drive. I you know, I do enjoy trash service. You know, although I could do without, or I could make my own sewage. It is kind of nice to have somebody else doing that for you. You know, taxes aren't all bad. I mean, most people, I think, when we say things like taxation is theft, is it really comes down to income tax, which even our brilliant teacher Einstein said the hardest thing to understand in the world. This was Einstein. We just found gravitational waves in the cosmos out there, and he thought about, yeah. This guy says the hardest thing to figure out is income tax. When the genius of the 20th century says that nothing's harder than income tax, you know, he might be onto something.
Well, I mean, you know, at one point in the early 20th century, there was no income tax in the United States. For the first 100 and some years the country existed, the country had roads, railroads, excellent universities, an army and a navy that had won 8 or 9 wars, and still there was no income tax. The income tax got started not to fund basic needs of maintaining a civilization, but to go into certain political pet projects.
I've looked and I've looked and I haven't in the past. I would say 2 years. I haven't, or 3 years maybe. I forgot about it and left off. But I did look, and I did try to research as best to my ability. I cannot find anything that is available to the people that tells them what their income tax goes to. You can always compare the corporate budget to the military budget. Quite often they're very similar and very close. But for the average Joe who gives, 30-40% of his check, no, I can't find anything. And I've looked. I can't find anything that tells me what that money's going to, a shakedown, a breakdown, something that lets you know. I can do that with my property tax. I can do that with, every tax I pay pretty much. Import taxes that come on food I get from other countries, or gasoline taxes, pay for roads and that sort of thing. You can get a receipt back on everything but the income tax.
All true.
Yep. It's a black hole. Just keeps sucking.
It blows me away. We have a presidential candidate over here who's made comments and been likened to saying things like 90% income tax. And then you're taken care of completely. Then everything is free. And I'm really shocked to see how many, most of them young, eat that kind of thing up. I really do understand communal living. Part of me, I guess I'm part commie. I get communal living. I was raised in Boy Scouts, and I understood the need of a community to come together. Our church did this, raised in the church. Our church would go around and do canned drives and something like a Meals for Wheels, and always deliver charity and things like that, even with us youngins, the young kids. But it's way out of hand. And so many people, so many God-fearing people are willing to just lay down for it. Really kind of blows me away, but I think it also maybe there might be something in them that believes it's going to something better. Do you think there is merit for somebody who would willingly give up 50% of their paycheck to the government because they really believe they're doing good work, that they'll work more? And
well, how many people? How large of a percentage of the population do you think it is that would willingly do? I mean, that's one thing. It's talking about it voluntarily, but we can talk about that all day long. That's not the reality. Taxation isn't voluntary. Just my personal example. I'm in a percentage of earners here in Israel. I lose 50% of my paycheck, every paycheck. Half of what I earn goes to taxation here.
wow.
I can't even fathom 90%. You're asking people an unreasonable thing.
So, okay, that answers a question there. Does Israel have an income tax? Yes. A very
It has a very heavy income tax. Yes. I mean, per capita, we're the biggest defense spenders in the world, and then there's also, like public health care, which even though I have private health care here, I still have to pay for public health care for everyone else. So yeah, I mean, I'm not a big fan of taxation.
You get a receipt for your income tax. I assume other things, goods, foods, fuel would be taxed as well, correct?
Food food is taxed less than it is in America. Fuel is the big thing. Fuel is extremely heavily taxed. Anything car related here is heavily taxed. Car insurance, the cars themselves. Give me an example. What do you drive? Let me ask you that.
I have an old 2001 Impala.
How much did you buy it for? You can lie. You don't have to be honest. You can even lie to me. Throw out a number.
About $2,000.
About $2,000. Here it would cost you $4,000 because there is a 100% sales tax on cars. That's all cars. That's new, used, private seller.
Oh, Vault, 100%.
Yeah, yeah. Believe me. I mean, if you want to quote unquote feel the burn, come here and buy a car.
Okay, first world problems in these United States.
Well, this is a first world country too, but it's just that's not the point. The problem. My point is it's out of control.
Oh, yeah.
In gasoline, here you get a smaller amount of gasoline that they charge exponentially more for. What's gas where you live?
At the moment, we are the lowest in the nation, about $1.60 something, or one of the lowest, and it's $1.60 something a gallon, which is the lowest it's been in like 5-6 years.
Okay. Ours, if you factor in the conversion rate from shekels to dollars, is about $9 per liter.
Wow. Ooh.
And almost all of that is taxes.
But that's insane. I sure it's the taxes that aren't pissing off the Palestinians.
Well, I mean, most of them, I mean, they don't have the same taxes.
Right.
They
Oh,
have different taxes.
okay. Here's a question I can ask you. A shekel, biblically, is that worth the same as a shekel in the modern day state of Israel?
No, no. A shekel today, it's called the NIS, the New Israeli Shekel. That's what they're called. That's what the amount of currency is. 1 shekel is about 25 cents, so it takes about 4 shekels to make a dollar. The biblical shekel is way different.
Was that an actual weight of gold?
I mean, it was a currency. It was something it was something of value, and you were actually obligated to give a half shekel to the temple.
Which was gold.
Correct.
Backed in gold. Okay.
Gold or silver, one of the two. Maybe both at one point. I'm not sure, but let me see here.
I think there were both gold and silver. The half shekel was a half silver shekel.
Yes.
Is there a grain weight that how would you determine a shekel? That's one of those oral Torah. If you don't believe there's an oral Torah, tell me what a shekel is, because it's very important to God that He put it in His Torah so much.
It would have to be weighed against the value of something fixed. Kind of like the same, like you're familiar with the gold standard. It had to be something similar, but like the exact fine details, I'm not particularly well read on that particular section of law.
Not many are.
No, well, I mean, it's not it's not it's not. In order to get smicha, in order to get rabbinic ordination, you have to take tests over 6 different sections of halakha, of Jewish law, and that's not one of them, because it's not, in our time period, it's simply not relevant. There is no temple. There is no grain offering. There is no,
That'll come later when it's needed then. Yeah.
Hopefully sooner than later.
Right. And there are rabbis that are well versed in those laws, but that they're fewer and far between.
Sure. it's almost inspiring the way God's, to those whose heart moves them, to those who are, who have the wisdom, or that's the wrong, for those whose heart moves them to do this. Just by hearing God say those words, it would almost, inspire you to want to maybe throw in a few more shekels, or give a little bit more. It almost makes you want. It would seem to me that it would be inspirational to those who might have a weaker heart. You know what I'm saying? Because it's Sinai. It's hard to not be motivated at Sinai, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's hard to be motivated.
Well, just over these past couple of Parshas, I've got to thinking about the amount of gold that was contributed for the golden calf. However, whatever size that might have actually come out to be versus the overwhelming amount of contributions that were made for the Mishkan. Proportionally, it just, wow. And not to mention, it wasn't just gold. It was silver, it was copper, it was skins, it was dyes, everything.
So you think what we've heard so far about collecting for the Mishkan and the maintenance of the Mishkan, could this have happened after the first tablets? Because we seem to be slightly interrupted. I mean, don't we?
Oh, well, sure. I mean, Moses came down with the first set of tablets. He'd seen the golden calf. He shattered the first set of tablets at the foot of Sinai. And that's when he burnt the golden calf, ground it to powder, mixed it with water, and had everyone drink. I think we've discussed this before.
Yeah.
Very similar to the Sota, laws of Sota. And then that's when he was instructed, carve for yourself 2 more tablets like the first, and then come back up.
So the Mishkan could have been the we wouldn't have needed a Mishkan until the golden calf. I mean, the Mishkan is a reminder. It's the whole thing was to remind us of the Sinai event when God spoke to us, Israel. Now that kind of makes a little more. Now see, last week or 2 weeks ago, I was all for the Mishkan being spoken of before he goes up. And now that I'm reading this Parsha, it seems to make more sense this week that it was after the first set of tablets that the Mishkan was delineated, was given to the people to remind them of why they don't need idols. I'm probably missing a whole bunch of stuff, and I'll probably change my mind next week. But this week, that's what it feels like.
It all comes slowly. But that's what I said early when I came in. How many times have you read it, and it's different this time than the last time?
Every year. Every year. I can't imagine being raised in it. Growing up with it. I mean, what a mind-expanding experience.
Agreed. I think I know you've heard me say it before. You sit there and read the same words on the same page same order for how many years, and then one day it's like, wow, I never saw that before.
Leaps off the page.
Hiding in plain sight.
Of course, you should study Torah because it's your Creator's gift to you, but it's also good for you. It's really good for the head, good for the mind. It's yes, it's good for the soul. Yes, you can live a healthy life, but just studying it and looking at it, it's really, I want to say heady. It seems like such a mundane thing to say, but on a mundane level, it's very heady. It's good for the mind.
I don't know how many times over the past several months I've seen several people use the term mind blown or mind blowing.
Well, I don't want anyone out there to not pay their taxes because collectors can be quite vicious. If you live in a neighborhood and the family comes around, wants to sell you some insurance, don't worry about it. We'll take care of you, like they did in New York and Chicago. Consider it insurance. We'd hate for something bad to happen to your place. And you give them their money, and you know what? You might even get some business out of them. But you will have a business in which to work. Let's hope we can just be a little more fair. It really does come down to kindness, I believe. There's a mentality in Western thinking that's embedded to people and their children that you're born guilty, basically. And who are you to not want to, or to be independent? I really think the sheeple mentality they whip into people with modern religion only softens them up for stuff like income tax. That's why it's so popular. It's been done for generations, thousands of years, a couple thousand years anyway, but they whip you down that you owe, that you owe, that you owe. To make a living is considered making an income. Like corporations before the states really, before the Industrial Revolution, a corporation wasn't a human being, and you pay taxes, don't pay taxes. You pay a corporation to build a bridge for the public good. It worked for the public good under the strict adherence of the king or oligarchy or whoever's in charge. And they did a job. Everyone got paid. Everyone paid their families. Everyone got paid, and then they moved on. And nowadays, in the States, if you are doing that work to make an income, to just pay your taxes, pay your mortgage, not pay your taxes, but pay your bills, that's considered income, as if you are profiting above that which you know what I'm saying? That you're making more than you need to be making. That for some that somehow goods for services, the goods are considered a profit, as if you should be working anyway. You should be lucky to be making so much. Born a sinner, you owe. You're born in debt, you owe. Most of it's an illusion, but when people believe it, it makes it true.
Well, true. I mean, on one level, if you read back a few Parshas, when Joseph was viceroy in Egypt, the famine got to be so bad that the people, first of all, I mean, when they ran out of money, then they gave up their cattle and eventually their possessions. And then lastly of all, they said that they would become serfs to the government. that the land that they received, worked on, and got produce from was all government issue, government seed, government land, government property, uh, just the utmost welfare state, if you will.
And they never gave him back when the famine was over. There was no jubilee in Egypt.
No, I never thought about that, but you're right.
Well, if you want a viable, productive, a jubilee makes perfect sense. Like not taxing your neighbor, or in Israel, I should say, when you're in the land, you don't tax your neighbor. You don't tax your, another Jew, another Israelite.
Well, yeah, and going back to what you were saying about charity earlier, the 8 levels. On one level, there's the tithe that you give to the Levites, the third year tithe that goes to the ger, the widow, the orphan, and the Levites every third year.
Could that be? Well, that would also be to maintain an economy. If they have no houses, no mortgage, like that couldn't even be that would be a tithe. That would not be a tax. That'd be a whole different thing, wouldn't it?
Right. It's a form of charity, because even the land that the Levites live on isn't their land. It was just sectioned off by whatever tribal area that they lived in, and that land was donated, if you will, for the Levites to live on, make a living, do whatever it is that the Levites were doing. And that's quite often, every time, like I said before, when you see that third year tithe mentioned, it always mentions the Levite, but it also mentions the widow and the orphan and the ger in your gates.
So that even isn't a tax. It's something completely different. I'm trying to find the taxes, and the only way I can come close in Torah, in the 5 books so far, is the census. That's the only time that it's not willingly, voluntarily given. It's commanded by God, you do, and everybody has to do it. I am really surprised to hear about a 100% tax on buying anything.
On cars, yes.
I'm blown. But you'd think in Israel it'd be more. One would hope it would be a little more Torah based.
Oh no, I mean that's the state. I mean, look, 80% of the people that live here are Jews. The state was founded by Eastern European socialists. That's the whole founding ethos of the state. It's not a religiously based society, although there are a lot of religious people that do live here.
Well, like on Shabbat, you just don't get to use a computer, or you don't get to. I mean, a tourist.
If you're a tourist?
Well, yeah, my ex-wife went over there, and she came back and tried to tell me all about it. She was very interested at one point, especially when the conversion classes when we were married. But she said, yeah, she wanted to use the computer, forgot that it was Saturday, and the hotel guest looked at her like she was crazy, and then it hit her.
Oh, a lot of hotels that they don't really care because they cater to foreign tourists. But I mean, no, I mean Tel Aviv, like the public bus runs in Tel Aviv, which is a big city here. Didn't used to, but it does now. But other major cities like Jerusalem and other places, like the bus shuts down on Friday afternoon. I would say most businesses are basically on Saturday here in Israel. It's kind of like how Sunday was in America in the 1950s.
Okay.
which is nice, but it's not everywhere that does it. But again, there's no penalty for violating it. It's a secular democratic state. It's just a ceremonial thing. Like, you're not going to be arrested, taken before a Beit Din, and stoned for driving on Shabbat here. You can drive on Shabbat legally. It's not really a problem. But
There are some neighborhoods that will stone you, though, right? They'll throw rocks at you if you drive through.
That's a very small percentage. That's in basically one or two places where that might happen. And if that's the case, more or less, that's your fault. Don't drive through those neighborhoods on Saturday. If that's the case, you're just being an ass.
Going into Jew gang territory.
Yeah, I mean, they shouldn't be throwing people in response to it. That's not a very nice thing to do. It's not a Torah-based thing to do either. But that's, yeah. But no one goes to Mea Sharim at 5 o'clock on Friday and starts driving without knowing exactly how that story is going to end.
So, okay, all right, dot connected, historical dot connecting. When you say Eastern Socialists, are these the Bolsheviks? Or is that something?
Many of the early Jewish people that came here and bought land and started kind of like a quasi-government that later became the government of the state of Israel. A number of them were Bolshevists. Yeah. That's why, I mean, look, the very first ally that the state of Israel had was not America. Before America, we had the French and the British as allies, but they weren't even our first ally. During the war in 1948, our war for independence, do you know where we got all of our weapons? We bought them from Joseph Stalin. He was the only one who would agree to sell us weapons because he felt that if he supported us, we would eventually support him. We would become a Soviet bloc country, but that never happened. And so immediately after 1948 and the early 1950s, the Soviet Union stopped having anything to do with us, and they started arming the Arabs.
I didn't even think that was Joseph Stalin who sold them. Yeah, that would be Joseph Stalin who. Yeah, I knew that was your biggest ally at the time because they wanted a socialist.
He wanted a communist enclave in the Middle East, but he never really got it. We took his weapons and basically said, "Screw you."
Good. He couldn't have picked a finer guy. It's going to a good cause, Mr. Stalin.
No, I agree. My father spent 12 years of his life in Stalin's prisons, so.
Holy mackerel. I mean, I could have found a better expression. I'm so. It's holy cow, holy mackerel. I say holy cow, and I'm like, don't say that in Torah study. It gets people in trouble. Well, here's to liberty. Wow. Were they as bad as the South African prisons, where you couldn't stretch your arms out?
I don't know much about the South African prisons. I know those were bad too, but I know it was pretty horrific.
My goodness.
He was sentenced originally to 25 years, and they let him out after 12.
Well, kind of. Okay. So there's just a good red streak still running through the land over there, kind of like there is here. I mean, a lot don't know America's first socialist was elected in like 1880. It was 1880, 1882 was the first socialist elected.
Yeah. Well, a lot of American presidents of the 20th century were socialists, especially in their political and economic outlook. Both Roosevelts are a really good example, especially FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He was a hardcore socialist, but they kind of conveniently leave that out of the history books.
I had a friend of mine say that socialism works against human nature.
It does. In many ways. And in reality, socialism could not exist without capitalism. Capitalism can exist without socialism. Socialism cannot exist without capitalism. It can only exist as kind of a quasi-parasite of capitalism. You take the Soviet Union, for example. You know how they figured prices? Yeah, of course, Marx's theory of labor value. Yeah, no, that's not how they did it at all. They looked at what prices were, how they were valued in America, and how they were valued in capitalist societies. That's how they figured out a price. In a society where socialism is dogmatically followed, you have to price things based on the amount of labor that was put into it. And that doesn't work. You have to price things based on supply and demand, which is a capitalistic concept.
China's not a bad modern day example.
Oh, yes. The lovely Chinese government, where they abort your children if you have too many of the wrong gender, sex, and they'll you can't even say the word God in public. You have to say boss. My aunt was is a missionary, Christian missionary, and she went over there, and you cannot talk about God in public. You can be jailed for that in China.
Right. Well, my father was jailed for having a book, so it's.
Oh.
Yeah, it was printed in the late 1800s. It had been with his family since that time. It was a Hebrew to Yiddish book of Psalms. That was covered under a couple statutes of Soviet law. It was first of all, it was religious reading material, which was banned. More specifically, it was culturally subversive reading material, which all Jewish literature was considered subversive. So that got him what's called an Article 58, which is crimes against the state, which was an automatic 25-year sentence.
For the Book of Psalms.
Mm-hmm. He still managed to keep it, by the way, and I still have it.
Ah! Baruch Hashem.
Baruch Hashem.
Well, their system failed, and they're kind of, I don't want to say laughing stock, but it's system's even kind of, it's just gone out of style.
It's gone out of style with some people, except people who are delusional enough to think it still works. I mean, look, as messed up as America can be, you do not have people making rafts out of lawn chairs trying to escape it.
Yeah.
Like they do in Cuba. You don't have people building a wall between Canada and America to try and keep people from fleeing, like they did in East Germany.
Not to mention our southern border.
Well, apparently now more Mexican folks are leaving the country than entering now. The heck with this, man. I'm going back home. Y'all can keep this, shiznat.
I had not heard that.
Yeah, it was an article a few weeks ago. Several articles that said that more people, more Mexican folk are leaving than coming over.
So that wall, if it does get built, it's going to have one sign on it, one sign only, exit.
I guess so. They have there were some Minutemen down there that were patrolling the borders, citizens, not police, not military. I mean, some might be ex-military, I'm sure, veterans, but they're these were civilian landowners who would patrol the border and they were explicitly told not to interfere with people who were coming across, but they could keep the peace, if there was a problem. And that's apparently frowned on lately.
Which part's frowned on?
Patrolling the border where citizens do it. The Justice Department said something. It's been a few years, but they weren't happy with them. They still do it, but they wouldn't sanction it. They want nothing to do with it. They said it was bad. So what I'm getting here to wrap things up on this whole tax talk is that taxes as we know them today in many other parts of the world than America, who doesn't have it near as bad, as much as we might gripe, you're right, that's nothing. As I heard our friends over across the world in the Holy Land paying 100% income tax. I'm not even going to mention the good. I'm just going to say 100% income tax on something. That's insane.
No, it's not an income tax. It's just it's when you buy a car. That's just it. It's 100%. But it's the highest you'll ever be taxed on your income is about 50%, which is where I'm at right now. Which is still freakishly high.
Freakishly high. These taxes just don't happen in a Torah-based society. It wouldn't. It's not natural. And from what I've heard about the way things were handled in Jerusalem during the first temple is taxes basically killed the nation. They split up, and
it caused basically a civil war. Yeah.
A warning to those of us. A great warning. I think it's about human dignity. When it all comes down to it, the whole thing's about human dignity. If you want to volunteer yourself for the state, go for it. But it seems to me that putting an income tax of 50% or 100% sales tax on anything would seem to be a dehumanizing thing to live with. We can take from you, and there's nothing you can do about it. And it really is taking. Any other tax you get a receipt for. How do you know that the half shekel you paid in the census went right to the Mishkan? And the Mishkan was the central hub of all things Israel at the time in Torah. It was obvious where your money went, but yeah, I can't see. Only in corruption, only in dehumanization do we get this kind of mad tax. We've got tithing, we've got contributions, we've got tzedakah. We have all these things in the Torah that where people are giving up something of themselves for the greater good. The poor, the Mishkan, the Levite, the Ger, the orphan, the widow. There's common good in that. There's a common good in collecting a census for the sake of maintaining the most sacred thing in the nation. I'm having a hard time. I don't want to say taxes, but there seems to be precedence here that they could be a real pain. I'm not sure God would be happy with an overtaxed population.
No.
Well, go ahead.
Well, we're so used to dealing with currency. Currency became a convenient way for anybody to do business. I mean, if you're a farmer and you own an animal that you plow with and it needs attention from time to time, well, you know, you're going to call your veterinarian. He'll come over. He'll perform a service. And for the service that he provided, he is paid in food, sustenance, whatever. When the farmer reaps his crops, whatever he takes to the market to sell, he takes that money and then in turn goes and reinvests it into seed or materials, whatever is needed for to run the farm. Your milkman down the road milks cows, delivers the milk. He's paid by whatever, whomever he happens to do business with. The jeweler might reward him or pay for the milkman's service with some form of jewelry. But as far as money, it just, if you don't have a trade, which a lot of people don't actually have today, it's universal. I can just trade you this money for anything: a car, hospital services, medical attention. What do you do for a living? I'm a garbage collector. You know what I mean? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
In some respects, I guess the closest term I guess you could come up with would be bartering. A roofer has a daughter. She needs braces. She goes into the dentist. He fits her up with some braces, and then he tells the dentist, next time your house needs a roof, call me. It's on the house, so to speak. But you see what I'm saying? Trade for trade. No real money has to exchange hands, but each one's providing a service for the other.
There's room for both. There are people, friends of mine, people I know, and they'll rage against currency, the very idea of currency, and actually it's quite handy. And the Torah speaks of it. It's like, for me, if the Torah talks, that's it. It's in the story. It's the highest authority. God not only allows money, he asks for it to be collected for the holiest of holies, amongst the nation. And yet, you're still free. I always considered, I know he has servitude and a people got to serve the nations, and I understand. But to me, a Torah-based society has to be the freest society, that an example of, or a template for the freest society known to man. It's very free. There's so much freedom in it. There's so much freedom in the mind and the soul, but I think when you apply it in living, and if we put it into a communal or a social aspect, it's still got to be the freest system out there. Certainly the most natural.
Well, it's coming up about 10 o'clock, and I do need to cut it off here.
Ross, thank you so much for coming by, and Rabbi Gabriel, thank you as well. I'm going to cut off the live portion right now. If you like what you've seen, you want to see more, if you're tuning in or if you're watching this on YouTube, please feel free to go to the Idol Smasher YouTube page, and there's a whole raft of these. If you like it, get in touch with me here on Google+. I'll put you on the mailing list. We also have a group on Facebook, which you can join as well and get updates on topics and when we're going to have hangouts here on Google+. Until then, on behalf of the Rabbi and Ross and myself, Shalom. We'll see you next week.